It's February 18th here in Seoul, and I'm Kim Dami. We begin with the stories making the headlines at this hour, starting with the 9th hearing of President Yoon's impeachment trial. Tuesday's hearing will focus on examining evidence and organizing arguments of President Yoon's team and the National Assembly side over the South Korean leader's martial law declaration. It's unclear if Yoon will make himself present like in the previous 6 hearings. A senior South Korean trade official is in Washington seeking mutually beneficial discussions with U.S. officials as fears and worries in Seoul mount over President Donald Trump's tariff salvo. Talks to put an end to the Ukraine crisis begin between high-ranking officials of the U.S. and Russia in Saudi Arabia. The U.S. stresses no one would impose a peace deal on Ukraine, but Ukrainian leader Volodymyr Zelensky is warning against the Afghanistan 2.0 scenario in Ukraine. President Yoon's impeachment trial continues on Tuesday with its 9th hearing, but there's still uncertainty over whether the hearings will stretch beyond this week. We connect to our Oh Soo-young at the Constitutional Court for more. Soo-young, give us a rundown of what the hearing will look like today. Now, I understand the president might not attend today, right?
Good morning, Tammy. Yes, indeed. Today's hearing is going to begin at 2 p.m. and President Yoon's lawyers say that it's undecided at the moment whether or not he'll be showing up. The president actually missed his first 2 hearings, but since then he's attended his 6 most recent ones. According to court officials, today's session is intended for each side, the National Assembly's impeachment team and President Yoon's lawyers, to for and against impeachment, as well as go over evidence that the bench hasn't covered so far, as the last few trials focused on witness examinations. Now, to go over the main arguments made so far, the National Assembly's panel has claimed that Yoon's declaration of martial law was illegal, as he did not procedures, as was his proclamation of martial law decrees. The panel says Yoon also tried to disrupt parliamentary activities by deploying troops to the National Assembly and the National Election Commission and tried to arrest judicial figures. Meanwhile, Yoon insists that martial law was constitutional as his executive right. He says that the opposition party had made it impossible for the government to function by constantly impeaching officials, railroading controversial bills and cutting the government budget. He also cited suspicions of election fraud at the Election Commission and called on the court to investigate the Commission's servers and ballot papers for irregularities.
Well, on top of that, it's still unclear whether the court will accept President Yoon's appeal to postpone Thursday's hearing, which is supposedly the very last hearing, right?
Right, so when asked about it on Monday, Court Press Officer Chun Jae-yeon said that no decision has been made so far. So presumably the justices will be revealing their decision during today's hearing, either at the start of it or near the end, as they did last time. And Yoon's lawyers, they're expected to strongly push for postponement during today's session, as they also have to prepare for Yoon's criminal trial proceedings, which begin on Thursday morning. Now, 15 lawyers are working on the criminal case, but 13 of them are also covering the impeachment trial. So the lawyers have been calling for the twice-weekly trials to be reduced to 1 hearing a week, saying that it's critical for Yoon's right to legal defence. However, the National Assembly's impeachment team has called on the court to not postpone the sessions. Meanwhile, the National Human Rights Commission on Monday adopted a statement calling for a lawful trial process that ensures the right to defend oneself in court.
And Soo-young, this all affects the timeline of the verdict, which has taken around 2 weeks in the past?
Yes, Tammy, I mean, I would say that too. And let's say that the court sticks to the current pace of things, then any trial hearing scheduled after this would be 1 more hearing, I think, would be needed to wrap up the arguments and also hear a final closing statement from Yoon. And then a verdict would be delivered in the first half of March, I would presume. But if the court decides to delay the the 10th trial and adjust the date to next week, next Tuesday, as President Yoon's lawyers have insisted, then any additional hearings after that, possibly one or two, that would significantly lengthen the trial process, especially if the trial dates are scheduled 7 days apart.
It's a real high-stakes decision whether or not to postpone the 10th hearing on Thursday. Soo-young, let's wait and see. Thank you for the coverage this morning. So President Yoon now has just 2 hearings left to defend himself and prove the legitimacy of his martial law declaration. How will he make use of the remaining sessions? Let's turn to Professor Song Se-ryun this morning. It's good to have you back with us.
Thank you for inviting me.
So why do you think Yoon may not show up for today's hearing? I mean, do you think he will make himself present?
Well, I think there's an equally good reason to be there and not to be there. First of all, he doesn't have to be there. There's no testimonies of witnesses, and he is a prime witness, so he doesn't get to talk, presumably. So he can skip it. But at the same time, this is the most important schedule that he has these days. And I think the reason to be there might be that he wants to rally his supporters outside just to be in the news. So I think that if he shows up, it won't surprise me. But if he doesn't show up, probably he wants to spend a day strategizing what to come in the 10th, the hearing, and maybe beyond.
Well, legal experts think Yoon will show up on Thursday with the Prime Minister Han Duck-soo appearing as a witness this time. Now, why do you think the court decided to have Prime Minister Han Duck-soo as a witness after turning down the request from Yoon's side so many times? Why the need now?
Well, initially, I think the court's reasoning was that, remember, we have to distinguish the criminal trial and the constitutional proceedings. They might have thought that they have enough testimonies to decide on the constitutional question. But there is a high public interest in this trial, and the president's side has consistently asked for more witnesses. So I think the court might have reconsidered and say that, well, we're going to give a benefit of doubt and give as much accommodation to the respondent so that there won't be any criticisms or a major issue about the fairness of the trial. So essentially, court is bending over backwards on the procedures. Even if they didn't think it was necessary, but why not? Give them a chance to say whatever they want to say at the last minute. I think it is pretty clear that it's wrapping up the last stage. So what makes a difference in 4 or 5 days?
Right, maybe they're trying to highlight the transparency of this whole, political drama. Now, at the 10th hearing on Thursday, then Han and President Yoon will face each other for the first time since Yoon declared the martial law back in December 2024. Now, what kind of statements do you expect to hear from Han this time?
I think we know what he's going to say mostly. He would think that the procedure was a little bit faulty, and the martial law was not a good idea. I think he'll repeat that. Why do we want to have that? Well, from the defense side, they want to cross-examine him to discredit him. And the close and very active cross-examination has that effect. And just shaking the foundation or some premises that Mr. Han Duck-soo had in deciding whether the procedure was faulty or the martial law was out of the question. So I think that they want to have that day in court to cross-examine Mr. Han Duck-soo to shake his previous testimonies.
Professor Song, another hot potato here is the date of the final and 10th hearing on Thursday. Yoon's lawyers have filed a petition to change the date, push it back to the near future, arguing more time is needed as President himself, like you mentioned, is preparing for criminal trial proceedings. How likely do you think the court will actually accept the request?
Now, defense team's actions can be categorized in major big buckets, but one of the big buckets is to either delay or prolong the proceedings. I think you can look at it from that way. However, it is a plausible argument that there are 2 important proceedings on the same day. So going back to the court's willingness to bend over backwards to accommodate the defense team, maybe they'll allow it so that they won't have a criticism that they're rushing it through. to give undue burden to the defense team to defend on the two important the accusations on the same day. But I think they will be still mindful of the kind of a deadline. The 180 days a deadline, but the realistic deadline is April 18th when the two justices come off the bench. So I don't think they will allow too much prolonging of the proceedings, even if they do allow some accommodations.
Right, we all know the time is ticking. Now, if the court accepts Yoon's request, a ruling day will be pushed back as well. Is that so?
Yes, but not as much as we might think. I mean, if there is any gap in the proceedings, justices can get together and talk about what has happened so far and further their examination, further their deliberation of the case. So having more proceedings or more sessions might even shorten their deliberation time afterwards. So in the end, I don't think it'll make too much difference. I think the justices will get very nervous if the prolonging gets to the April dates. So I think that they will try very hard to accommodate, but at the same time, keep it under the dates of the March or sometime maybe early part of April. Remember that the President Roh Moo-hyun's and the President Park Geun-hye's proceedings took 2 months and 3 months. And the 3 months mark would be early part of March. So I don't think it'll go very far beyond that. If it takes 4 months, that's not strange, but not 5.
Alrighty, Professor Song, thank you so much for joining us this morning. As always, you have a wonderful day.
You too. My pleasure. Thank you.
South Korea is actively seeking to brace for the aggressive tariff push by the Trump administration. Seoul's Deputy Minister for Trade Park Jong-won has made his way to Washington to engage in what he aims to be mutually beneficial discussions with U.S. trade officials. Lee Seung-ja has more.
South Korea's Deputy Minister for Trade Park Jong-won arrived in the United States on Monday, where he's set to meet with a number of officials at the U.S. Department of Commerce and the Office of the U.S. Trade Representatives. Upon arrival, Park stressed the importance of holding the talks, especially as U.S. President Donald Trump's trade policies affect all of America's trading partners.
I believe America's major trading partners around the world are all affected, so I think that our country also needs to be even more careful in negotiating with the United States.
Park also said that he would seek mutually beneficial discussions during his talks in Washington by listening to what the U.S. has to say and explaining Seoul's positions. He also noted that talks on the tariff issue may continue following his visit, raising speculation that Industry Minister An Deok-geun could also visit the U.S. for high-level talks. Amid growing concerns over the impact Trump's tariffs may have on South Korea's economy, a business delegation led by the chairman of SK Group and the Korea Chamber of Commerce and Industry, Chae Tae-won, will visit Washington for a 2-day visit starting Wednesday. It will mark the first visit by a Korean business delegation since the Trump administration took office last month. The Korea International Trade Association also plans to send a 10-member delegation to a number of southern states next month to promote South Korea's investments in the region. The Federation of Korean Industries is also looking to send a delegation to the U.S. Faced with Trump's aggressive trade policies, South Korean businesses are expected to seek strategies to mitigate the risk of operating in the U.S. Lee Seung-ja, Arirang News.
U.S. and Russian officials are set to sit down in Saudi Arabia and detail their plans to end the war in Ukraine, but this time without the direct involvement of Ukraine and Europe in the talks. Choi Min-jung reports.
High-ranking officials from Washington and Moscow are set to meet in Saudi Arabia on Tuesday to lay the groundwork for potential peace negotiations to end the war in Ukraine. The U.S. and Russia confirmed that U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio and Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov will meet, along with other top officials. This marks one of the first high-level in-person meetings between the two sides in years and is expected to pave the way for a future U.S.-Russia summit.
President Trump mentioned Saudi Arabia when talking about a possible venue for a possible summit. It is understood that this place suits both American and Russian sides, so this joint decision was made.
This development has raised concerns among leaders of Ukraine and Europe who have been left out of the U.S.-led diplomatic effort. U.S. President Donald Trump's Ukraine envoy Keith Kellogg said on Monday that it was unrealistic for everyone to be at the table, but emphasized that no peace deal would be imposed on Kyiv. He also said the U.S. would act as an intermediary alongside Ukraine and Russia as the two main protagonists.
The fact is, we're looking at, you can have the Ukrainians, the Russians, and clearly the Americans at the table talking, but we've got to have specifics to get to a point.
European leaders held an emergency meeting in France on Monday and insisted they must have a say in the talks. European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen warned that Europe's security is at a turning point, stressing the issue was not just about Ukraine, but also Europe. And despite U.S. officials suggesting that Ukraine and Europe would have a role in peace talks, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky on Monday dismissed Tuesday's negotiations taking place without him and told reporters that he did not know anything about them. In response to recent U.S. statements about ruling out Ukraine's NATO membership, Zelensky cautioned the West against repeating past mistakes, warning that it could lead to a scenario similar to Afghanistan in 2021. Back then, the Taliban rapidly took control of Afghanistan after the U.S. and NATO withdrew their forces. Choi Min-jung, Arirang News.
And ahead of the U.S.-Russia peace talks, U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio met with Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman during his Middle East tour on Monday, where the two sides are presumed to have discussed the Washington-Moscow talks. Considering close ties between U.S. President Donald Trump and bin Salman, Saudi is expected to play a mediating role in the scheduled peace dialogue. According to a statement released by the U.S. State Department, Rubio and bin Salman also reaffirmed their commitment to implementing the ceasefire in Gaza and ensuring the Hamas releases all hostages, including American citizens. Rubio also discussed increasing economic and defense cooperation between the two countries. The latest Asian Winter Games in Harbin was another stage for Team Korea to prove their excellence on ice. It was an opportunity as well to discover rising stars and their talents, including this speed skater who returned home with 4 medals. Our Park Kwon-woo sat down with her.
2 gold medals, 1 silver, and 1 bronze. South Korean speed skater Lee Na-hyun's achievements at the 2025 Asian Winter Games. Skating since the age of 8, Eve recalls how she began realizing her talent as a young child.
That I won gold medals in most of the races when I first started. So I was very into this sport since I was very young, and I think I enjoyed every moment.
That's how things continued. Last year, Eve broke the junior world record in the 500 meters and then went on to win medals in every race at the Asian Games this year. Although Yi humbly said it feels like she has just taken her first step in her career, she is hungry for more medals.
I would love to win so many races as possible. I'll try to get 100. But I think, honestly, like 10 to 15 is, like my goal right now. Yeah.
Showing her humility, she even said she first needs to improve her skills.
My goal is just to keep showing people that I improved in every races, and also to show them a good conditions in the Olympics. I would love to get a medal, but first my goal is to do all the things that I practice in training.
This mindset ties into her personal life motto.
I always tell myself, let's not make this regrettable. let's show everything I've got. Keep training hard until your role model become your rival.
Called the next Lee Sang-hwa, Lee spoke with admiration for a role model.
I love that nickname and I feel honored, and it makes me feel like I have to do more harder. If I meet her, I would say I'm a fan of you and I want to be like you, so please watch how I do.
Looking ahead, Lee plans to skate for at least another decade, leaving a message to our future self.
10 years later, I would tell myself to just enjoy skating. Like, no need to get a medal, just keep pushing myself hard. I just do it, as you can always quit.
She also expressed her desire to remain the first athlete that comes to mind when thinking of speed skating, while requesting more support for both the sport and herself. Park Go-nu, Arirang News.
Now, let's take a look at the stories from around the world with our Choi Ji-hee. Good morning, Ji-hee.
Good morning, Tommy.
So let's start in southern Lebanon, where an Israeli strike has killed a Hamas leader. Tell us more.
Right. So just before the deadline for Israel's full withdrawal from Lebanon, an Israeli drone strike killed the head of Hamas military operations in the country. On Monday, the Israeli military confirmed that a targeted drone strike in Sidon, southern Lebanon, killed Mohammad Shaheen, the head of Hamas operations department in Lebanon. Israel says Shaheen was involved in planning attacks against Israel citizens with support from Iran. The incident occurred just one day before the February 18th deadline for Israel's full withdrawal from southern Lebanon, as stated in a recent ceasefire agreement. In response, Hezbollah's leadership has issued strict warnings, stating that any Israeli presence in southern Lebanon beyond the agreed-upon deadline will be considered an occupation, and they're prepared to take necessary actions. China has condemned the United States following a recent update to the U.S. State Department's website concerning Taiwan. The alteration has contrastingly received a welcome response from Taiwan. On Monday, a Chinese Foreign Ministry spokesperson criticized updates made by the U.S. State Department last week on its online fact sheet on Taiwan. The State Department removed the phrase that said it does not support Taiwan's independence. The Chinese spokesperson said the U.S. position sent the wrong message to Taiwan's independence separatist forces and urged the U.S. to immediately rectify its mistakes. Conversely, the Taiwanese government described the updated language as positive and friendly, reflecting the strengthening ties between Washington and Taipei. Over in Canada, a Delta Airlines plane crash-landed on Monday at Toronto Pearson International Airport, flipping upside down upon impact. The aircraft carried 76 passengers and 4 crew members. Emergency responders reported at least 15 injuries, with 3 critical injuries, including a child. While the cause of the crash is yet unknown, the flight was operating amid windy weather after a snowstorm. Initial investigations point to the recent heavy snowfall as the cause of the crash. All flights at the airport were suspended, causing delays and diversions. Finally, to Hong Kong, where its first locally born giant panda twins were revealed to the public for the first time. The 6-month-old cubs, born in August 2024, were introduced to large crowds at Hong Kong's Ocean Park over the weekend. The 2 baby pandas are currently referred to as elder sister and little brother, but a public contest to name them has been launched, and the submissions will open until March 7th. The so-called panda economy is expected to boost tourism and local businesses in the city.
Today, marks the second seasonal term of spring on the seasonal calendar, Usu. Around this time, ice starts to melt with spring rain. But instead of warming up, temperatures are taking a step backward, making it feel like we're heading straight back to the winter. It felt like -9 degrees on the way to work in Seoul. On top of that, dry air continues, raising concerns about wildfire risks. Strong gusty winds in some regions could make conditions even more dangerous, so please be extra cautious with anything that could start a fire. Afternoon temperatures will be 1 to 3 degrees lower today. Seoul gets up to 1 degree, Daegu at 5 degrees Celsius. Feels like temperatures in central regions will be below freezing even in the afternoon. So you'll need to bundle up, but don't have to worry about fine dust affecting your outdoor plans. It stays much colder than norms this week under bright skies. Before warmer days arrive next week, make sure to dress in layers to stay comfortable.
That wraps up our morning edition of Arirang News. Arirang News will be back at 5 p.m. Korea time. Until then, goodbye.